G'day, Australian writers, novelists, and storytellers are some of the best in the world. From the visceral realism of Tim Winton, to the historical depth of Richard Flanagan, to the atmospheric mystery that is Jane Harper. I've picked 5 books to prove just why. Welcome back to a mini-series where I explore some of Australia's greatest literature. Backed by popular demand, this series explores some of Australia's greatest writers, some of the best pieces of literature to come out of Australia, and those books and stories that have just stuck with me that little bit longer. G'day, my name's Tim. I'm a writer, I'm a reader, and I'm a creator. And today I look forward to sharing these 5 Australian books with you. Also, if you promise to stick around to the end, I will let you know that this stack of books right here is a prop. I don't have them all physically in front of me, but we're gonna have a good time nonetheless. All right, first up is Memorial Days by Pulitzer-winning author Geraldine Brooks. This book was just nominated for the 2026 Stella Literary Prize. The Stella Prize is an annual literary award for Australian women writers in all genres. It follows the story of Geraldine Brooks and her husband of 3 decades, Tony Horowitz, who passes away suddenly. And it is Geraldine putting back together the pieces of her life, the heartfelt moments that no one told her about when you are grieving and you lose someone. It is literally a lifeline on a page, and it is just this beautiful depiction of what a person can mean to us. After spending their early years together in conflict zones as foreign correspondents, Tony and Geraldine settle down with 2 boys at Martha's Vineyard. And this story follows Geraldine trying to grieve her 60-year-old husband who was healthy and trying to find the space for grief. 3 years later, Geraldine flies back to Australia before flying to a remote coastal island off the coast of Tasmania, Flinders Island, in where she tries to process her grief and write and create and reconnect with herself. It's a beautiful memoir of sudden loss and dealing with grief and the journey towards peace. I picked this book up because it was set on Flinders Island off the coast of Tasmania. And ironically enough, I lived on King Island, which is on the other side of Bass Strait. I'll put a map up on the thing here. And I connected with it because the place feels familiar, but I also connected with it because I was there during that same time period that Geraldine Brooks was there. And the thing that always caught me off guard was the vastness of such a small place, being able to go days without seeing people if you chose, being able to think and reflect and decide what it is that you want for your life. This was a beautiful depiction of a time where she was dealing with this grief and trying to process it and trying to heal. And in a very different way, I felt like I did the same thing. As Flinders Island and King Island are 350 kilometers apart on the different sides of the strait, it just feels close, and knowing how isolated both of those places are. King Island being 60 kilometers long and 30 kilometers wide. And having spent 2 years of my life in this quiet, isolated place really allowed me to gain something that I don't think I would have had anywhere else. And I don't tend to include memoirs on this kind of list because it doesn't feel like it quite fits. But Memorial Days by Geraldine Brooks, who has just been nominated for the Longlist Stella Prize and is a beautiful piece of work, feels like it fits here because I think it encompasses something about Australian landscapes and place and how we live our lives. And I'm blown away by this memoir, and I think you should give it a read if you get the chance. Anyway, that's Memorial Days by Geraldine Brooks. All right, next up we have Cloud Street by Tim Winton. This follows the story of 2 working class rural families, the Lambs and the Pickles, that live in a run-down house in Perth, Western Australia. The novel explores themes of fate, resilience, and grief as these 2 families intersect with one another and spiritually heal, even though they are vastly different as people. This was a novel that I read while I was in Scotland, and I remember just feeling gut punched by how powerful the story is and how much it made me feel homesick at the time of reading it. It was just something that felt incredibly visceral and powerful as you were turning the pages of this story. There are two things I really liked throughout Cloud Street. Cloud Street and the house on Cloud Street itself felt like this character that transformed throughout the course of this novel. It felt like, you know, when they tell you that a house can breathe and has its own bones and has its own being, it felt like that while being multiplied into something else. It almost felt like it could transform in this weird, crazy, spiritual kind of way. The house has elements of magical realism. It is haunted from within. It has different surreal experiences that these characters interact with as the course of the novel goes on. The other thing I really liked was this was a novel that Tim Winton started writing when he was away from Australia as he was traveling through, I believe it was Europe. And he promised himself he would not come home until he finished this novel and it was ready to go. And strangely enough, I feel like you feel that through the pages. It's almost like this longing and this reminiscent of like what Australia is and this beautiful, simple life of what Australia can be. This novel spans over the course of 2 decades as you watch these characters' everyday lives unfold through these pages. And it's weird and it twists and it's strange. And honestly, I can't say enough about this novel. It feels like I can't give it justice while trying to describe it. What I really thought about after I finished this novel was that I didn't really understand the direction it was trying to take me. I finished it and I was a little bit confused. And in the years since having finished it, I still think about it once a week and I put together the lessons and the stories and the storytelling. And the further I've been away from it and the longer I've been away from it, the more I seem to understand, which is almost this beautiful, impactful thing that story can do and storytelling can do. And it's something that I'll think about forever, I think. I'll reread it at some point of my life and I'll still learn more things. And it's almost the breathing room of this house on Cloud Street and you as an individual, as you go back and forth and you think about this novel, is where the real beauty, the real character, the real magical moments exist from this story. And I couldn't think of a better novel to sit with for this long. Sticking on the magical realism theme, we have The Living Sea of Waking Dreams by Richard Flanagan. This story is a magical realism marvel. It is the story of a woman, Francie, who is on her deathbed and her 3 children struggle to let her go. It's set against the 2019-2020 Australian bushfire catastrophe, while paralleling personal loss with environmental destruction. And as Anna convinces her mum to try live in her dying days, she starts losing her own body part and they start disappearing, and it's symbolizing the loss and the destruction of humanity as you are trying to preserve life. It highlights this detached existence and it just has this incredible message that runs through the core of the novel. And throughout the story, the sky is on fire, signifying all of these things coming crashing down. It is a beautiful depiction of climate change. It's this beautiful depiction of where we are as a society. It has such meaning. I think what Richard Flanagan did in this novel was nothing but extraordinary, and the give and take that he provided. And there isn't many writers on the planet that can do what Richard Flanagan can do on a page, and it just feels important. Yeah, it feels important. It feels important in a way that I can't quite dignify. Still think about that one a lot. I bloody love Richard Flanagan. There's no irony that 3 of the novels on this list are set in Tasmania. I love Tasmania with my whole heart. It's even on my shirt. But also all centered around this environmental climate change impact and putting words to this thing that just feels incredibly large and putting some hope and direction in those pages to help us sort of navigate that in a way that I think really matters. And Bruni by Heather Rose is no exception to either of those things. The novel Bruni is set on an island, Bruni Island, and mainland Tasmania. And Astrid, who is the main character, a UN negotiator, comes back home as they are trying to put a bridge between Bruni Island and the mainland of Australia. This is a political thriller, and Astrid starts to uncover the truth of why they're truly putting a bridge in and what it means. And as things start to go slightly astray, where that starts to take this story. And as this story starts to take place, it really fills up with neoconservatism, Australian politics, Chinese manufacturing, Chinese politics, and the give and take of what these things are and how impactful they can be on a society. And as obviously a fictional book and as a large scope, it has really beautiful moments of describing landscape and describing place and being in a place, but it also has this rich conflict at the center of this story and holds your attention and holds your grip and really takes you on this ride of a different version of the world and a different version of us and what life could be, while also being Heather Rose at her finest. It is a page turner. It is fast paced and it really holds your attention, and the twist at the end, you won't even believe the twist at the end. This was one of my favorite novels of 2020. Whew. Heather Rose. Also have Heather Rose's new book that is on my TBR, and I'm looking forward to giving that one a read too. And the final one on this list is Migrations by Charlotte McConaughey. She is one of my favorite writers of all time, and this story is no exception. It's actually her first novel, but it is the novel that I read second from her. And before I get stuck in, I've read this novel twice, but the second time I read this novel or listened to this novel as I was climbing a mountain in Peru, getting chased by wild dogs, and really felt immersed in this story as I was getting trapped by wild dogs on the side of a mountain in a rural town in Peru, as the world was slowly falling apart. It was just something else as an experience. So I think that's why I kind of hold it with a higher standard, and I just have like significant memories tied to it. So there's that. Anyway, I'll tell you what it's about. Migrations is a dystopian climate fiction novel which follows the character Fanny Stone as she tracks Arctic terns, a bird from Greenland to Antarctica, and their migration pattern. In a world where animal extinction is incredibly high, Fanny gets on a boat to track these birds, and throughout that time she has to face her own traumatic past and her dark secrets, and the uncovering of what that is this story, Migrations. I talk about this too much, but Charlotte McConaughey's superpower as a writer is she zips open her pages, she puts you inside, and you are in the story, watching from behind, almost like it's a movie, as you are there, getting swept through the story with the character. And I don't fully understand how she does it because it's incredible, but that's how she tells her stories, and that's what she does. And truthfully, these stories just stick with me in this way that some other stories just disappear moments after. But the visceral feeling of a Charlotte McConaughey or a Tim Winton or a Richard Flanagan, and those images and the power that those stories leave long after turning the final page, is what I love about those authors, and it's what I love about those stories. And Migrations is no exception to that. The novel explores environmental destructions, pain, and loss, but the human element of what humans are willing to do for love and redemption as people. And that's the crux for me. That's the part that I find really powerful. And Migrations is an emotional story for both the planet and the character, and going through this roller coaster with her is honestly why I read fiction. Anyway, Australian writers, novelists, and storytellers are some of the best in the world, and these 5 were some of my favorite of all time. Let me know in the comments if you have any further recommendations. I would love to hear them. Thank you for joining me in the 3rd installment of this series. I'm really enjoying doing it. I'm passionate about it. I care about Australian literature. I care about sharing it. I'm going to be diving into some more niche Australian literature in the coming months, so stick around for that. In the meantime, have a lovely week. Be kind to yourself, be kind to one another, and I will see you back here for a really fun, exciting challenge video next week. Quick little hint, it involves Haruki Murakami. That's all I'll say. See you back here.